evening and welcome to the Journey Home. Tonight's program is a special. It's a bit different format than our usual Journey Home program. I have three guests tonight. One of the reasons that Mother Angelica asked me to do this program now almost 5 years ago was that I had the great privilege of being on her program back in 1996 and talk about the work that I was involved with in the Coming Home Network, helping converts and clergy, Protestant clergy and their family come home to the Catholic Church. On that program, we talked about why we as Protestant clergymen came into the Catholic Church and all the struggles that involved. We also talked about the struggles that brought for our families, particularly our wives. My guests tonight are three clergy wives who actually each one came in at different stages with their husband, who were clergymen, and all three have been on the Journey Home program before, have shared their journey. You've asked them questions before, but they're with me tonight to share together, remind us of their journey, and then talk about the struggles, particular struggles of being wives of clergymen in the issue of coming home to the Catholic Church. Sitting across from me is Lee South. Lee's husband, Ned, was an Anglican minister. And then next to her is Dale Sibley. Her husband, Gordon, was a Methodist minister. And then sitting next to me is a great privilege, is my wife, Marilyn, who were you?
Presbyterian.
You were the wife of the best minister that ever was, Presbyterian pastor. And one of the distinctive features of the three of you is that in a way you represent the three different scenarios that happen so often with clergy and their wives when they convert. Lee, you came in before Ned, and you came in after your husband Gordon. Well, you came in together, but he was committed first.
Right.
And then Marilyn and I came in right step by step by the grace of God. And so I know you're all maybe just a little bit nervous tonight, but that's all right. The Spirit will bless us tonight. But I want to begin, if we would, by asking you to, Lee, why don't you begin? Give us a reminder of your journey into the church.
As a charter member of the First Clergy Wives Club, I am delighted to get things started here. I grew up in a Dominican convent and fell in love with God in a Catholic setting. My parents were Presbyterian and had not expected this to happen at all. I put God aside in my teenage years and my 20s and came back to Him through Campus Crusade for Christ at college, and then married a Episcopal clergyman, which was fine with me. I had become an Episcopalian some years before, and I was set to give God all of my life as I knew it. I was going to be the best clergy wife ever. I was going to have model children. My husband would, rise up and call me blessed. My price would be above rubies. I was going to lead scripture studies. I was going to have the best vacation Bible school that ever was.
You play piano too, don't you?
Badly. I did not join the choir because choirs are sometimes a hotbed of insurrection against the clergy. Perhaps not so in the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church. So I stayed away from the choir.
Oh, yeah.
But and as I think back on it, I was fighting a battle, but it was my battle, it was not God's. And I grew weary. When we moved to Ohio, I was absolutely desolate and lonely, visited some Catholic shrines, and there was Jesus again in the fullness of the Catholic Church. I thought for a while that I could pray the rosary and ask the saints to help me and remain an Episcopal clergy wife, but eventually I grew so disheartened that with Ned's full blessing I entered the Catholic Church about 5 years ago now.
All right. And then he came in with 2 years later, right?
Yes, I thought it would be the 12th of never. I never was expecting Ned South
no
to follow
indication
me
when he
anywhere,
came in.
least of all
Yeah.
the Catholic Church. Yeah.
You're right. When you were coming in, he was giving no sign whatsoever.
Oh, not at all.
All right. But you came in with his blessing.
Yes.
All right, good. Well, then we'll set your journey in the shell for just a little bit. We'll definitely come back to it. Dale, how about reminding us?
All right. I grew up in a family that was really, really glad that I showed up. They were waiting for me, and I was always very loved and very cared for, cared about. Was baptized in the Presbyterian church as a little baby. And Daddy was a real famous radio announcer at the time. So we had to be real good, my brother and I, because he said, now if you're good, all the people who hear my show will be happy, and if you're acting up, they're going to think that we're not a nice family. So basically I learned to be good, and I loved my dad. I was his little princess. But I learned that to please him, I needed to be good. And then we didn't really go to Sunday school or church very often. It was Daddy's day off. But my mom taught me prayers, and I could sing Jesus Loves Me, but not much depth. And but then on later in junior high school, Daddy had a stroke, and some neighbors, in order just to help my mom, took us to church, the Episcopal church, just in time for me to get to go to confirmation class. Went to that and was confirmed. I honestly really didn't understand what I was doing, I'm sorry to say. And then after that, there was no more Sunday school, so I went on longer and longer and wasn't really in the church too much. Gordon came into my life, and we were married in the Episcopal church, and then very soon after that we moved to Alabama and then to Florida. My daddy said, "Oh, we got a rolling stone here." Little did he know. But in Florida, I really made a real commitment to Jesus as my Savior. I was being good and thinking I was earning salvation, but he showed me really beautifully that it was a gift. And so after that, I accepted the gift and moved on from there. Gordon and I later went to seminary together, and I was encouraged to be ordained, with an MDiv, Master of Divinity, but I really didn't feel God leading me that way. I felt the supportive non-ordination degree, so that's what I got. And then we had little churches all over Alabama, precious brothers and sisters. They became my family. And the part about becoming Catholic, is that now?
Yeah.
Gordon, the Methodist Church is one of the things that it's noted for is you can be way on one end or another of the pole, of the spectrum. And I was way on the four spiritual laws and the choruses and the lively, heartfelt faith, real evangelical. And Gordon was growing more and more and more toward the liturgical side. But there was space for both. So we were both Methodists, even though we were poles apart. We were one in Christ in the Methodist Church. And I saw him moving more and more that way. But I misread the signs. I thought he was becoming a very liturgical Methodist, but he was moving toward the Catholic Church. And so one day he said, I think when we retire, I'll become a Catholic. I said, great, that's good. And I'll be a Methodist, and we'll live in the home that they have for retired clergy. And you can go to Catholic Church, I'll be Methodist, and that'd be fine. And then in a little while, though, down the road, not too long, he said, honey, I'll be sinning if I don't convert. And it was, just out of the blue. It was radical, it was startling, it was horrible for me. And that began my having to face whether I would convert with him or not. I knew I couldn't stay in the parsonage. The next man and his wife weren't going to raise me, but I knew I would leave the parsonage and everything that was so precious to me at the time. And I would either do it rebelliously or I would do it lovingly. And that was a real hard choice for me.
So you came in with Gordon, but there was about 2 years between the time that he broke this news to you to your accepting the faith? Is that what it?
Well, it was in the fall of '98, and when he told me, I said, God, this is a crisis for me. I mean, a major crisis. Either he's moving toward heresy, and I need to lovingly redeem him from this awful thing he's doing, which, of course, that's how much I knew about the Catholic Church, or I need to go humble myself and get on with the program and go with him in love, not rebelliously. And God graced me with no knowledge, no understanding, but with a heart assurance that he was leading Gordon into the Catholic Church, and he hadn't forgotten that Gordon was married. So on the basis of that gift from God, I yielded to at least get my parachute and go up in the plane. I wasn't sure I'd be a Catholic, but I'll give it a whirl. At least try. But then it was only 6 weeks after that. He told the church, and it was only 6 weeks that we had. Yeah. Wow. That was another story.
I remember those times, because he and I went out to lunch one time before that. I remember that, and him talk about some of the struggles, the decision that he was going to have to make.
Yeah.
It was an easy one. All right, Marilyn, you want to give?
Can I just start in the middle? I don't have to start at the beginning.
You can start wherever you want to start.
I thought I'd just start in the middle. It'd be different. I remember praying the prayer, okay, Lord, if you want me to be single, and nothing's working out, these relationships with men are not working, I will be single. And we were probably engaged, maybe, I don't know, maybe not even a month or two after that. So, you give it up, you give it to God, you say, not my will, and it's amazing. It's been a roller coaster since. I was baptized and confirmed in the Presbyterian church, and then the family moved and we began attending a Methodist church. My father had been raised in a Methodist church, and I think we began going to a Methodist church after we moved because there was a good youth group there. And so finished high school in that denomination. Turned my life over to Christ at least a couple times at church camps, but didn't know what to do after that. You visit nursing homes and you try to be good, and I didn't know what else to do after that. So, college years, I never seemed to get to church. I went away to school, and so it was my faith was becoming diminished, and I always say that my, not in the end, but almost in the end, faith, morals, it was all educated out of me. By the time I was finished with graduate school, I was a disaster. I was agnostic at best, and I just slipped away, further and further away. So I was, by the time I was getting, I guess it was my late 20s, I was kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. I was trying to live life the way I thought it was. I was, self-help books, whatever. That's what I was. I was kind of trying to find meaning from, and I was working in the field of alcoholism, and they do teach that you have to have a spiritual recovery, and I was counseling people that they had to have a spiritual recovery, and I had no idea what my spiritual life was. So I returned to church, and I, lo and behold, a new assistant minister came to the church I was attending, a Presbyterian church, and he started a singles group right off the bat, and his job was to contact all the singles in the church, and And I remember I could not go to that meeting that he had called, and so I had somehow let you know that I fully intended to be a part of this, but I wasn't able to attend that meeting, and so we met for coffee instead. And that was the beginning of a real tumultuous 2 years. And we were kind of on again, off again, trying to work together in a singles group, but it wasn't smooth sailing. I was such a baby Christian, and I was trying to learn, trying to become faithful to the Lord, trying to turn my life over, and it was a real struggle because I had fallen so far away. And I don't know, somehow we got married. I was like, I was like, okay, God, I want to be a Christian, but this is a little much to ask. Marry a minister? That seems a tall order. And I had asked Marcus, isn't there a school to go to that will teach me how to be a minister's wife? I don't even play the piano. I don't know what we're talking about here. And he goes, well, if you want to marry me, you want to be a minister's wife. Haha, the joke was on him. So it was kind of a short-lived vocation, being a minister's wife. We were married in his little country church where he was pastor. Became a pastor, and we had our first son a year later, and then we moved to a much larger church, much larger town, and I thought, oh well, I was home. We were going to be for 10 years, and I was getting to teach Sunday school and redecorate the nursery, and had a lot of rights. Not so much the responsibility, but I had a lot of rights. It was a fun place to be, but we were only there a year and a half, and my restless husband, who always had been restless, things just didn't seem right. And he had heard Scott Hahn by that time, and he thought maybe he was going to take a different direction in life. Maybe he wasn't going to be a minister anymore. And I'm like, oh, honey, maybe we could just hang in here for a little longer. But God provides. Can I bring up the game, or do you want me to?
No, that's
okay.
Too much distraction.
Yeah. All right.
Well, the point being that God provided financially all along.
God had provided. So we only church hopped for a season, and then it was he was studying, and he was spoon feeding me about the Catholic Church, and I guess I can come back to that part, but I think it was just God's timing and a real gift that we were able to come in at the same time.
Yeah, when I looked from my side of it, as I was reading, I was finding it pleasantly. I did not expect you to receive what I was learning, because it was so radical to me. And then when I would share it to you, I was constantly amazed on how the Spirit had opened your heart to these truths. It was kind of like, boy, that makes sense.
It was.
What a blessing.
Yeah, it was a different thing than we experienced with the Coming Home Network. More often than not, we receive calls from a clergyman whose wife wants nothing to do it, is threatening divorce. And in our case, it was a wonderful journey in that sense of discovering.
It's not because I'm real docile and submissive either, is it?
No.
So it was a miracle,
Yeah, there was a unity there that was a blessing.
And he's a good teacher, so I think that has something to do with it. He's very patient and gives information, I think, as I could handle it. But I was reading, he had some well-chosen books, I think, that were put in front of me that certainly helped. But I never wanted to be a Catholic. I had never, my wildest dreams.
I don't think any of us here did, right?
No.
Although you
Well,
mentioned
I did,
the convent in the beginning.
I did, but I was never brave enough to pursue it until I became too miserable to do otherwise. And I wanted to say that your book, Journeys Home, was absolutely instrumental in Ned South's conversion. You gave it to me because someone else hadn't shown up that night, and I had learned to just lay it on the coffee table, not to say, honey, here's a book you might really like to read. And I came home from work one day, and he said, these are all my stories. This is me. And after John Haas, I believe, was on Journey Home, we went out to a crazy little Mexican restaurant, and he said, I have something to say. And I thought it was awful news. I didn't know what he was about to say, and he said, I've decided to become Catholic. So thank you, Marcus.
Well, that was funny too, because I remember that I got to go in detail on this because this is funny, because the book was intended for a woman here who was doing the Hispanic translations of the program.
Yes.
So I had written it to Mary, right? Maria, right? Well, she left, so I had this book to Maria. So you ended up, and what did he take as his?
Right, is his confirmation name.
Maria?
The second name, I believe. Yeah.
Right.
And I
He saw that
cannot thank you enough, Marcus.
Well, let's thank the Lord on that, of course. Your journeys then, let's talk a bit about the struggles particularly of your journey into the church as wives of clergymen. All right, what are some unique things that you can remember that made that particularly difficult? Of course, but yet on the other hand, you're willing to give up the roles that you had either wanted or had grown into on the journey.
Well, the church is a jealous mistress as well. She should be. But she is a jealous mistress, and the lines were for me always blurred. How much can I ask of Ned? How much have I no right to ask, because he belongs to God first? That was difficult. That was wearing.
In fact, that is a big question which we will discuss either in the first segment or in the second segment, and that is the place of one family, one faith, the struggle of that, and the place of husband and wife in those issues. Now, you were in a case where you were seeing your husband make this journey at first. Did you feel like he was making it without you, or were you always brought into that with Gordon?
Well, to back up just
Sure,
a little, I had always wanted to be a preacher's wife. I thought that would be the neatest thing in the whole world. And then I married Gordon, and I thought, well, he's pretty good not to be a pastor, because he wasn't one when we married. And he was worth giving up the dream for. So, yeah, I really wanted to be one. It was a bit idealistic, or what I thought one would be like. But later, we had 2 children and went to seminary, and then, went to our first little church with children, our two children. So I loved it. I loved almost everything about it. I loved not being a co-pastor, which I turned that down in seminary with the non-ordination degree, but I loved being his helper. I loved teaching Sunday school. If there wasn't one to teach, I'd start a new one. I loved the people coming to the house and, sharing their heart stories. I loved evangelism. I loved missions, going out on all those little things you go out on, the nursing home, like you said, and the prison, and I loved all that. And
so they got 2 for 1 with you.
Well, we complimented each other. We were a wonderful team, because we were very different, but a nice compliment. But I was really fulfilled in that role. I loved it. So it wasn't a role I had to learn to like. It was like it was tailor-made for me.
So when you heard Gordon give you that, you heard it in different levels then too, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. And at the same time, though, like you say, it was severe enough to have considered divorce if I had been open to that. But I wasn't open to a divorce. Yeah. That was not, that wasn't even a choice for me. Yeah. And part of that was my theology, and part of it was love. But so I thought, well, I have to find a way. And I remember you can't be unequally yoked. So I thought, well, we're going to be unequally yoked here directly. So one of us needs to change. And so I was God, how can we again find that unity in Christ? If he's going there, can't he wait for me? Can't he wait till he retires? Or should I just say, this is God's will, let's get on with it, Dale? And so that was, I heard it not only, I didn't have any prejudice really against the Catholics, but had no desire to be one. And so he was saying, I would like to go to be something that you don't want to be, which isn't how he worded it, but like you said, I heard it on different levels. I'm going somewhere where my wife doesn't want to go. I'm going somewhere that my wife, my beloved, will have no roles that she feels satisfied with. And I mean, I heard it spiritually, emotionally, legally in the sense of the marriage covenant vow. I heard it. It hurt at every level. It wasn't intended to hurt, but it ached at every level.
What about you, Marilyn? And if you look back on the time when we were looking at it, do you remember any particular struggles as a clergy wife for you? And in your case, it wasn't a choice to be, it wasn't your original dream to be the wife of a clergyman. But you had grown into it in many, many ways, and had been a good clergy wife in many, many ways, very respected by the church up in Champion. I mean,
Thank you.
all right. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think about children, and I think it's there's some pressure there with, your kids are in the limelight, and
It's like taking your children to your job.
Yes.
Is how I thought of it on Sunday mornings.
Yes. Yes. I hate to think of taking our 3 boys to a fishbowl on Sunday morning now, but anyway, we have.
I would hate to think about having to interrupt a sermon to settle down one of my sons. I would have been really roughed up.
Yeah. So we have our youngest is a special needs child, and he doesn't sit in church. That's not on his radar screen yet. And so, yes, I remember just struggling with one very active little boy, and all by myself, and just he's running through the sanctuary again, and
I was with a friend at Mass not too long ago, and she has 2 children, and I said to her afterward, I said, your children are so good during Mass. And she said, oh, thank you. And I went home, and it hit me, well, the real presence has a presence, perhaps. Not perhaps, but does have a presence. Jesus is truly there in ways we often don't pick up on it. I had never thought of that before. It's so obvious.
Well, there are probably lots of ways as we all look back. The role was probably wonderful in that, but I also, as I look back as a husband and a father and a minister, in many ways in which I look back, and I thank the Lord for the call to celibacy for our priests because of the struggles with that. And I think a lot of today who are pushing for married clergy or don't appreciate the struggles, though, of the side of the spouse of a clergyman and how difficult it is. I mean, in an environment where they're accustomed to it, on the one hand, they look for all kinds of opportunities for the spouse, but as Marilyn made reference, sometimes they got 2 for 1 in the sense of demanding an awful lot of the wives and the children, the place they are in the struggle of that.
Yeah. And you like to think your family has a certain parameter that they can count on daddy and husband, but that's not the case. People die, at midnight, and, their son is in a wreck at 4 a.m., and things happen on your anniversary, and, Gordon has come back from many a vacation for a funeral, and,
I see.
And what was that expectation you tried to put on me, Marilyn?
A 2-week notice for funerals?
Yeah. It's rough, but it was hard to live up to. Listen, we need to take a break. We're going to come right back in a little bit, so stay with us, and we'll take your questions for Marilyn, Lee, and Dale on their journey of faith into the church. Welcome back to the Journey Home. This is, as I mentioned, a kind of a special edition of the Journey Home in which my three guests were wives of clergy who converted to the church. All three of my guests, of course, converted to the church themselves, but at different stages in relationship to their husbands. Lee, you came in a couple years before your husband, Ned, who was an Anglican minister, and Dale, you came in, well, you both came in together, but he made a decision and then you lagged behind Gordon, and then Marilyn, you and I came in together by God's grace. We came in at the same time. Ready for an email?
Ready.
All right, let's take this first email. Well, this is from Sue from Montana, but it's being addressed to Marilyn and I, but really we all can answer this question from our experience in the public eye. This is the question. Because of your public conversion, do you feel pressure to raise your children and live your faith, your life differently than it would if you were not in the public eye? Love the show. I have learned so much.
Well,
I think, I'll just jump in real quick and then you can add, Marilyn, is that I think we learned from our experience in the pastorate, 9 years, about the stress that puts on children. That infamous label, PK, pastor's kid, and as a result of that, plus seeing what also the public eye did to others that we knew, that we've tried to keep a separate issue, that our kids don't even watch the program.
and I wasn't with you all those 9 years. I was only with you a few years.
That's right.
Yes, I think by God's grace, this I suppose could change, but we live in a pretty isolated part of Ohio, and where people don't even get EWTN, so they don't even, they don't even know Marcus has a show, and so my kids, unless we go on a trip where there's a conference or something, my kids don't even realize that their dad's any different, and I don't either. I mean, of course they get a kick out of it when somebody runs up and wants his autograph or something.
We're in the Vatican. I mean, more people know us in the Vatican.
Yeah,
there we are, Catholics around the world.
So, the kids and I are just home farming and doing laundry and.
I was thinking it funny, last Saturday I happened to go to the gas station and I was in bib overalls with manure on my boots, and I was pretty skudgy looking from working out, and I was thinking, nobody knows me here. I mean,
they wouldn't have recognized you either, honey.
Well, thank God on that. But how about yourselves? If you look back on your experience in the pastorate?
I have two different stages of an answer for that. One is when Gordon was a minister, when he became a Methodist minister, our children were already in elementary school. So we were lay folks all that time.
Yeah, okay.
And then when he became a minister, I thought, I want them to avoid the fishbowl syndrome and the PK stuff. So what I did is, we were visible. And yes, we had high expectations put on us, but I never said, don't do that because your daddy's a minister. It was always, do this or don't do that because you're a Christian.
Right.
Yeah. And it was never tied with the parsonage family. If it was wrong to do something, it was wrong for our family and all the pew-sitting families too. Yeah. And now that we're not a clergy couple, we both work here at EWTN, and honestly, we're a little bit visible here because they're so grateful we're converts. We're a little bit visible here and at our parish. You know, they're the ones that he used to be the Methodist minister. And, and thank God, you know, so we're still a little bit visible, but we try to act in ways that are pleasing to God, not because we're visible, but because we're God's children, and that helps make it easier.
Your children were they in college when you both came in, or high school and college?
High school, high school and college. I had so much to learn spiritually when my children were small that I had great difficulty separating God's expectations from my own expectations. I wanted them to be perfect, of course, and that's not what God had in mind at all. You know, it's just like my be the best, you know, scripture study teacher, have the best children's chapel. That's not what God wanted at all, and I was dashing past him and not listening to him. He wanted me, not what I could offer, and I did my children, I think, a disservice. Their dad, Ned, is much more laid back, and so he was a good antidote to that. But I had a good deal to learn.
Let's take our first caller here. This is Renee from Florida. What's your question for us tonight?
Hi, I have a question for the panel. Do you think that you would have entered the Catholic Church if your husbands had not converted?
Thank you, Renee. Very good question.
I can answer no. Just categorically no. And at the time, I saw that as a bad thing. I mean, like, I've got to do this. Though he didn't pressure me, the situation pressured me, or I felt some pressure to deal with it. If he had not wanted to convert, I wouldn't have considered it. But now, in retrospect, I thank God that he used Gordon to bring me, because he's so smart. He knew if he could get Gordon, he had me. and I would come because I love Gordon, and I believe Gordon's the head of our house, and short of him going off in some, you know, heresy, as I was worried about, you know, but he was in the truth and led me to the truth. So no, I would not have done it if he hadn't, and I thank him for leading me, bringing me along.
What about you, Marilyn?
Perhaps I feel in a similar way. I trusted you to a certain extent, that you wouldn't lead me too
Although
far
at times
astray.
you thought, well, this too shall pass.
Yeah,
you know,
initially I thought, oh, this was just a kind of a pipe dream that I had learned I didn't have to get excited about every idea that came down the pike, because he was a dreamer. I mean, he thought of things to do and knew in different directions to go all the time, and you know, I learned that I didn't have to get excited, because that didn't mean it was necessarily going to happen. But when I realized he was serious, so you know, I was blessed with faith. I don't even remember us really having any serious disagreement along the way about that issue, and I think perhaps God knew that was the provision for our marriage, because we were still newlyweds at the time, and we still struggled in other areas, and we still struggle in areas. But this was one that we were able to be unified on, and it really.
I think what also helped in there was that we were both seeing the problems in Protestantism together. You know, the confusion over the pro-life issues. We were seeing that this Methodist and Presbyterian Baptists and all the confusion that was there. We were seeing that, so we became aware of the problem together. We just didn't know the answer. My original answer was leave the ministry and go back to school. So that's where we thought we were going to go. Well, then we started looking at the Catholic Church. What we found is that each answer we saw is like an aha experience for us together. Oh, sola scriptura, doesn't work. You know, and the sola fide doesn't work. So we were seeing it together. So now in your case, you came in first.
Right.
Maybe we should jump the flip side. Would Ned have come in? Was that what you?
I don't think so. I used to tease him that when he retired, I would become Catholic, and he would say, "Wonderful." We'd been married 18 years when I really started a serious search for God within the realm of the Catholic Church, and it took me 8 years. You know, I had married a man who was clearly the spiritual head of our household, whom I was determined to obey. You know? And so it was a wrenching experience to do this, but.
Well, I guess I have to add here that I believe every Christian would come into the Catholic Church if they learned what we learned. You know, God will use people in your life for ways to get your attention, but if everybody knew and understood what the Catholic Church taught and who she really is.
Yeah.
And for some, he might appeal to the heart first, and some to the mind first, and some to commitments, or, I mean, they're all different ways, entrees into getting a soul back home.
Yeah. And since conversion usually does involve some kind of crisis at some point to awaken us to our need for spiritual growth, in our case, is thankful it was our spouse that was led first in that sense. You know, for you it was me, and then that awakened the door. But still, it had to be your conversion.
Well, I can remember being willing to get on the journey and look, and I knew I had between December 6th and you know, Easter Vigil was at 4 months. I allowed myself, I mean, that's all the time I had. And it was either like, it's going to happen or it isn't. And I can remember struggling with every single doctrine, every single, everything, mentally, you know, plus all the move and the finding a place to live. And so it came to the point for me that standing in front of the altar during the Easter Vigil, it's like, Dale, it would be better to say no than to do it without integrity. Walk down off of here if this is not what you really, really mean. And I thought, I don't have all the answers. And it was like he said, who's your authority for truth? You know, you, Lord. I said, okay. And I knew then that that was it. You know, I still don't have all the answers, but I accept the authority of the church and the Pope and the magisterium and the catechism in communion, meshing with the Bibles. Bible. So then I was able, at that last 11th hour, to say, I'm willing, and I'm doing it with integrity.
I didn't struggle with the doctrines, but I did struggle terribly with the loneliness. You know, going to Saturday night Mass on your own, going to early morning Mass when it was going to be perhaps a year before you could receive the Eucharist, hearing the priest say, this is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Happy are they who are called to his supper. And I thought, how happy I would be if I could ever be called to that supper.
There's an email waiting, but I want to go with this issue that you brought up, and that is the loneliness of the journey. Because talk a bit about the effect on your decision, your husband's decision, in relationship to your friends, your fellowship of folk in the faith, and how that was a struggle.
We had been at our church for 1.5 years, and it was a whole different area. So all of my social life, all of my friends were in the church. So when we were no longer part of the church, that was a huge void, and I think pretty quickly kind of circulated that at least with your staff, who were some of my friends, had an inkling that Catholicism might be involved, and some of these people were ex-Catholics. They did not want to touch me with a 10-foot pole, and that was very lonely. All of a sudden I had no friends.
God lived in the same house for a year after that, and it was not easy.
Town. God provided for me because I had a second baby that year, and so he was definitely occupied me, and that was, I love babies. That was wonderful, and but I didn't know what to do about baptism. We had when we started going to Mass, I still was like, what are we going to do with this baby? He's not baptized, and I didn't. When we realized that we were going to become Catholics, and I was convinced. I didn't go there just because of my husband. I was convinced. By the time came when we could enter, I was totally convinced that this was home. But I didn't have any friends. I couldn't ask to be godparents. I didn't have anybody. How could I get, and it's kind of hard to get some of those questions answered when you
don't.
don't.
Or to ask our family to do that, which we're not sharing at all.
No.
And this, still don't to this day,
Right.
share the faith. No one's on either side of our family have come in with us.
Right.
Well, I felt lonely as well, and some of our friends were not happy. Some, it's like, well, whatever, float your boat. And I thought, it's much more serious than that. And I was aware that but the loneliest place for me was with Gordon. And he loved me so much, and he was so willing and so patient, but he had no way to know how much agony I was going through. He just couldn't, because he was happy. He was experiencing that happy, he was joyful. So he couldn't understand how every day was filled with deep agony. Missing my friends, missing my role, it was a major grief experience for me. And he loved me, but he just couldn't, and that was lonely for me to be that close to him as much as I love him, and not be able to, feel that we were together in that.
I think that I finally decided, well, I'm just going to keep putting one foot after the other down this road. I'm lonely now, but this is a journey. It will pass, and I'm seeking the Lord Jesus Christ. Fellowship is nice, but it's ancillary. I just have to see what God has in mind down the next bend of the road.
Let's take a caller. This is JB from Georgia. What's your question for us?
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
I was just wondering, and this is a question for everyone, really, how did your children feel, or how did they react when you converted?
Thank you, JB. Quickly, the program's coming to a close.
My children were school age, and they wanted to know immediately what Dad was going to do. And if Dad was going to continue to be an Episcopal clergyman, then, that's what they... that was their comfort level. They did admire me very much when I gave a talk in the Episcopal Church about my journey. They were proud that I had delivered a good talk, and they have supported me. But they have not come into the Catholic Church.
David, our son, became a Catholic with us, did it with grace, and just
How old was he?
Now he's 34, so he was 32.
Okay, so it really was an adult decision for him then.
Yes. But the seeds had been planted a long time for him, but it was easy. Our daughter Joni is not yet. She lives in Maryland, so she's not really day-to-day involved with the decisions or even the difference it's made.
Really?
Oh, I think our oldest liked being a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
He liked working the crowd after the service was over, just like his dad did. But so I think he had a bit of a hard time. He was a bit of a precocious child, even though he was pretty young. I think it's the grace of God that we had named our second boy Peter. I just thought that was kind of profound.
He was actually our first Catholic because he was baptized.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think the gift of being able to stay at home with the children and the opportunity to homeschool them and learn the faith along with them has been so wonderful. And just getting to share that with them on a day-to-day basis. And it's just
I wondered if we're drawing to a close, and I thought maybe, how about each of you give a word of encouragement to anyone who might be watching, who might be in a divided issue like this. From your experience, what you might do to recommend.
Well, I'd like to recommend this book.
All right.
By Lynn Nordhagen. Lynn, I finally read it over the weekend. It's great. She has compiled stories and it's entitled "When Only One Converts," and it's just supportive for whatever situation you're in with the faith, one way or the other. Just not trying to twist everyone's arm to come to the church, but just giving some real solid support for marriages that are having these struggles. I would just highly recommend this book. And
Lynn has been a guest in the Journey Home program, and I think they're going to feature her book in Bookmarks, Doug Keck's program, in the fall. So wonderful. That confirms everything we've been talking about.
For me, it would be for the one who is ready and the one who is not ready to pray and to be open to the truth. And Jesus will lead you to the truth. The Spirit will bring you to that place. And for the one who's anxious and waiting for it to happen, and I would say be patient and try not to be a stumbling block to the other person. But on the other hand, don't just leave them out there. Try to gently participate at the other person's pace. And then for the one like me, just trust that God will lead you to a good place.
yes.
And if you're open to the truth, He'll lead you to the fullness in the Catholic Church.
And just make you more willing to help with the chores and be more loving.
That'd be nice.
Without complaining.
Dear friends have given me some tapes by a great Dominican priest, Father Vogt, and he keeps hammering away at this one issue, which I think is key for me. If you want to grow spiritually, and hence be a wonderful influence on those around you, you need to detach from all that you hold dear and worthy. You need to be right. You need to have everybody enter the Catholic Church on your timetable. You need to be thought well of whatever it is. You need to be on time. Love those people that don't think as you do. And God will give you ample opportunities to become humble. Don't say anything. Pray. Don't say anything.
Right.
And leave books on coffee tables.
Yes.
And one thing that helped me too, real quickly, Marcus, was to do the things, like for me, I had to appreciate my own being on a journey, and not to think I could be on Gordon's journey or on your journey, but to do the things I could do with integrity and pray for the grace to grow. And I'm taking little baby steps, but I'm bigger than I was.
Yeah, I never felt the pressure from you to convert. I never felt the pressure, and I would say, I think that was your advice. Don't try to convert your spouse. Just
a lot of that came from knowing you, in terms of knowing what would be best for you. In a sense, that I think that if I pressed, it might set us back. But the point is that really we need to be in love with our spouses. That's the key. We love the Lord and we'll follow the Lord everywhere. But if we want our spouse to go, we've got to, that old symbol of the triangle. The more you love Jesus, the closer you get together. Well, that's what has to happen. And if we're forcing our spouse into the Catholic Church, then they may not discover the beauty of it honestly.
Well, I found too that it would cause me to be bitter were I to do it just for Gordon. So I waited till I could do it with integrity.
Well, thank you, all three of you. Marilyn, it's great to have you on the show with me. Thank you both for joining us on the journey home, and I pray that our words together have been an encouragement to others, because God has done much more than we could have ever imagined when He brought us home to the Catholic Church. And thank you for joining us on the journey home. Look forward to being with you again next week. God bless, and may He bless you and your marriages as you seek to follow Him faithfully.